Welcome back to Aussie Med Tunes. So I've been away for a little while, been focusing on study as well as having a lot of things going on in my life. I'll maybe have a video about that later. But for those of you that have received results saying that you passed your interviews, you've got a good enough GAMSAT and you're now into medicine, congratulations, you've got an exciting and very difficult path ahead of you, but I'm sure mostly right now you're just excited. If you hear any weird whining noises, it's because I have two dogs stuffed away in my kitchen area, which is one of the reasons that I've been more busy. I got a dog and I'm currently looking after a friend's dog, but more on that later. For those of you that have medicine coming up next year and you're wondering perhaps what you can be doing in the meantime, you're a bit concerned about how fast paced it might be and you're not sure if you're going to be able to keep up, this video is for you. I've got a few tips on what I recommend studying over your break, but I'm going to assume for the sake of this video that you have no scientific knowledge, you're coming from finance, arts, or high school, something like that. These are my recommendations. First off, I definitely encourage you, even if you've already studied it, to do some anatomy. I, over my break, while I was waiting for medicine to start, had lectures from a friend that had done anatomy in their undergrad, and so I just watched through those, taking notes, learning about the different bones of the body, the different muscles, etc. I found that I didn't memorize any of it, but when it came up later on in medicine, it was much easier to learn it then because I've already seen it once. So what sort of level should you be going to for anatomy study before getting into med? You want to be learning all the bones and all the parts of the bones. You want to be trying to learn all the muscles, their actions, ideally their innervations. You want to know about all the major blood vessels, so arteries as well as veins. You also want to know about the major nerves. The big things to know about are the brachial plexus, a series of nerves here in your shoulder, as well as the brainstem and the cranial nerves. So there's 12 cranial nerves to learn. They do go over it a lot of times, so this one's not so important, but the brachial plexus confuses people a lot of the time, so try and learn that. Why should you be focusing on anatomy more than anything else? Is because it's a really big part of medicine in first and second year at the University of Sydney, and I imagine at a lot of other universities as well. You've got practical assessments for it. You've got to be able to identify muscles, bones, parts of muscles sometimes. You've got to be able to identify all the things that I already mentioned in spot tests. So visually, you should try to get the best idea of what all these parts are and their names before medicine. You learn it all during medicine, so don't put any pressure on yourself over this break, but it does help to get yourself familiar with some of these names and parts beforehand, because then it's much easier to retain that knowledge as you're learning a million other things at the same time. But spot tests are actually only a very small part of your grade. They really helped me out because I always did very well in them, and I can have a video later as to how to study for spot tests and how to study for anatomy when you're in the midst of university. But spot tests, yes, ultimately maybe 5%, 10% of your grade as far as anatomy goes, but there's also a big chunk of anatomy on every major exam I found. And for me, I thought I knew my anatomy, I'd watched the lectures, made some questions, but they somehow managed to find ways to make it very confusing. So learn all the attachments of muscles, learn their actions, learn their orientation in regards to other organs and muscles and bones, and you should be fine. As for how to go about studying that while you're waiting for university to start, like I said, I got lectures off of a friend that had already done anatomy in their undergrad, and I watched those. But there are also textbooks, of course. There's a website called KenHub, which is what I started using towards the end of this year, second year for me, to try and get a bit more anatomy knowledge in a hopefully more organized way. I didn't find it that helpful, but they've got some free content so you can utilize that. If you're not certain to the depth of what you need to know, I'm going to link down some quizzes that I made, which were essentially for me to learn the different parts of bones and muscles. I don't think I've got any nerves on there. I've got the brachial plexus, so you can memorize and test yourself using those, but probably a lecture or a textbook's the best way to go. So anatomy first. The next thing that I recommend is brushing up on the basics of biology. So this is mostly, I suggest, on a cellular level. So learn what a cell is, learn what a membrane is, learn the different parts of the cell. So things called organelles, the little bits inside of cells, things like the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, all of that. The next step, I would suggest learning DNA, how it's assembled, how it replicates, things like meiosis, mitosis, those sort of basic things come up from time to time. And if you've already got your basic knowledge of that before med starts, you won't get bogged down in those details. And if you've still got time left over and you want to start learning some real medicine, or nah, it's not really real medicine, it's immunology though, is the next thing that I recommend learning. It's all about the T cells, dendritic cells, white cells, B cells, plasma cells. I did have a video already regarding all the cells in immunology, or at least the major ones that I recommend knowing. Like I said, dendritic cells, macrophages. There's a dog breathing under the door, just ignore that. It's fine, I swear. Learn all of those major cells, what they do, why they do it. So different cells are for bacteria as opposed to fungus or parasites. Or listen to her whining. T cells, there's a couple different kinds. There are CD4 T cells, CD8 T cells. So learn the different major T cell types, what they do, and a little bit about how they do it. So some of them are for killing cells that are infected with bacteria. How do they recognize that? It's for, there's a couple major proteins that they look for. There's a lot of proteins they look for, but there's a couple major ones that you can read up on. I recommend getting that under your belt because that confused me when I was first learning about all those things, and having to review it a bunch of times whilst learning a bunch of other things did slow me down a lot in preparing for exams. So if you've already got a base in that, it's going to make things much more streamlined for you coming up to your first exam. Those are the three major things that I recommend learning. Anatomy, biology, and immunology. Just the basics. You don't need well, except for anatomy, just learn as much anatomy as you can. Guaranteed it's going to come up at some point. It doesn't come up during your first or second year. You'll have a surgery term, and when the surgeons ask you questions, you'll be like, oh, I studied this before med, I know the answer to that. Not that I remember anything from anatomy ever without reviewing it, but hopefully you will. As for biology and immunology, where to learn those from, I didn't study them before studying medicine, so I don't have a great recommendation other than try to find a textbook. Like I said, I've got that video on immunology that you can check out. That's mostly the basics as I recall that you would want to know. I don't know if I went into too much detail about T cells, so maybe that's a future video, or maybe that's something you can find from another source. So that's the end of this video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I'm pretty late with uploading a new video, I realize that. Like I said, I've had a hectic year. However, I am hoping to get more videos coming out. So if you've got anything you want it to be on, definitely let me know. I guess the next video that I do might be for people moving to Sydney or moving to a new place to start medicine, and just going over what my experience with that was like. And I might introduce my dog in another video. Until next time, bye-bye.